The village lay under the soft silver light of the moon, its beams brushing the crooked rooftops and worn cobblestones like a gentle caress. Night was never truly dark here. The twilight lingered, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting. Children slept fitfully in their homes, mothers whispered lullabies, and in the distance, the faint echo of bells called toward the ceremonial grounds. Leora's small cottage sat at the edge of the village, its walls heavy with the scent of herbs and earth. She knelt by the bedside of her child, her heart trembling in a way that made her breath uneven. Her little boy, Irindor, was pale, his small body curled tightly beneath the woolen blanket. The curse had claimed him quickly. His breath came in shallow whispers, and no herb or potion could revive the warmth that once glowed in his chest. For nights, Leora had scoured the village, speaking with the elders, poring over ancient scrolls, and praying to the moon goddess for mercy. And at last, her path had been made clear. The moon trial. It was a ritual feared by all, a ceremonial offering to the forces that bound life and death. The elders had spoken of the Alpha King, a being of immense power who appeared once in every generation to mark the brave or the desperate. Now, standing at the edge of the ceremonial grounds, Leora felt the chill of the night wrap around her like a shroud. The villagers had gathered, their faces etched with fear and awe. The air hummed with tension, and the moon above seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. Every eye was upon her. She could feel the weight of expectation, of destiny, pressing down, yet even that could not quench the fire burning in her chest. She had a choice to make: watch her child die, or offer herself to the unknown power of the trial. Her hands shook as she stepped forward, the grass crunching softly beneath her feet. She was small, unarmed, and entirely human in a world of legends and shadows. Yet something deep within her would not bend. "I offer myself," she whispered, her voice carrying across the silent grounds. "Take me, if it is the will of the moon. Save my child." 2. A low murmur rose among the crowd. Some crossed themselves, whispering prayers to protect her. Others watched with wide eyes, afraid that such courage could summon misfortune. And then the moonlight shifted. Brighter, sharper, as if the heavens themselves had leaned closer to witness her choice. From the shadows of the palace that loomed above the village, he appeared. The Alpha King. He moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, his steps silent yet commanding. His cloak of deep midnight rippled around him like liquid shadow. Eyes like molten silver fixed on Leora, and the air around him shivered. She felt a pull, magnetic and unsettling. Her knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself upright. The king stopped several paces away, his presence enormous, yet strangely hollow. Every villager held their breath, knowing the trial had begun in earnest. "Child of the mortal world," his voice came, deep and smooth, echoing like distant thunder. "You step forward willingly, offering what should not belong to me. Why?" "My son is cursed," Leora said, lifting her chin. "I cannot bear to see him die. Take me instead. I am no one, but he is everything." Her voice wavered, yet there was a strength beneath the fear. She did not flinch, did not falter, though her heart screamed against the enormity of her choice. The king's gaze swept over her, cold and assessing. He did not reach for the ceremonial blades or the bindings that had been prepared. Instead, he studied her as if weighing her soul against some unseen scale. A silence stretched, the kind that presses on the chest, heavy and unyielding. Then, a movement. The king raised his hand, and the moonlight coalesced into a pale, silvery mist that wrapped around Leora. It was not cold, but it carried the weight of something ancient, something that belonged to the heavens themselves. She felt the mist touch her skin, warm and strange, and her breath caught in her throat. You dare offer your life freely." The king murmured, almost to himself. Few possess such courage. His gaze returned to her, sharper now, with an intensity that made her knees weaken. "Yet I will not allow it. Not this way. Not this way." Before she could speak, a searing pain cut across her shoulder. She cried out, stumbling forward, only to find that she did not bleed. Instead, a mark glowed there, a sigil of the Alpha King, intricate and luminous, etched into her flesh without blade or fire. It pulsed with an eerie rhythm, echoing her heartbeat, binding her to him in ways she could not understand. The villagers gasped, some stepping back in fear. Others whispered that the mark meant destiny, that Leora was now touched by a power far beyond their comprehension. Leora herself felt the rush of conflicting emotions: terror, awe, relief, and an unexpected twinge of connection to the king who had marked her. Her child stirred, tiny fingers curling around the blanket. The curse, it seemed, had loosened, and Arendor's chest rose with each shallow, precious breath. Leora felt tears streak her face, joy and disbelief warring within her. She had saved him, but at a cost she could not yet name. The Alpha King stepped back into the shadows, his presence still overwhelming, his silver eyes fixed on her. "You belong to the mark now," he said softly, almost as a warning. "And soon you will understand what that means." "Why me?" Leora whispered, her voice trembling. "Why mark me, instead of letting me? Let me give my life. Let me." The king's expression was unreadable, a mask of power and centuries of solitude. "Because courage such as yours is rare, and because your fate intertwines with mine, whether you wish it or not." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The villagers dared not move. The moon hung in suspended brilliance, and Leora's heart beat faster than ever. She was safe for now, but she could feel the mark's pulse, like a drum in her chest, reminding her that she was no longer entirely her own. Her gaze drifted to Arendor, sleeping quietly now, unaware of the shadow that had just touched their lives. She wanted to hold him forever, to shield him from the darkness. But the king's mark reminded her that her protection came at a price. "Do not fear what you cannot yet see," the king said, his voice a murmur that seemed to drift through the trees. Then, almost like a phantom, he vanished, leaving behind only the lingering silver mist and the weight of destiny. Leora sank to her knees beside her child, pressing a trembling hand to his chest. She felt the warmth return, slow and steady, and allowed herself a moment of relief. Yet the mark on her shoulder pulsed faintly, as if reminding her that the night was far from over. Whispers rose among the villagers. Some spoke of curses broken and miracles wrought. Others muttered warnings, fearful of the king's intentions. And in every whispered word, Leora heard the echo of a single truth. She had entered a world far larger, darker, and more powerful than she could have imagined. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Questions of why the king had marked her, what power she now carried, and how she could possibly protect her child from forces that moved like shadows behind the moonlight. Yet, amid the fear, a strange feeling emerged, an awareness that her life and her heart had become entwined with someone she did not yet understand. And high above, the moon glimmered, silent and eternal, as if it too waited for what would come next. The king's fortress rose above the village like a dark sentinel, carved from black stone and glinting moonstone that reflected the faint light of the eternal twilight. Its towers seemed to pierce the sky, reaching toward the silvered moon as if drawing power directly from it. Leora approached with cautious steps, her heart still heavy from the events of the moon trial. The mark on her shoulder throbbed faintly, reminding her that she was no longer free, that her destiny had been rewritten by a hand she could not yet see. She entered the fortress through a vast archway carved with symbols of forgotten power. The air was colder here, tinged with an energy that made her skin prickle. Servants, silent and pale, passed without acknowledgement, shadows gliding across the walls like ghosts. The corridors were wide and echoing, lit by braziers that burned with silver flame. Every step Leora took seemed magnified, each echo a reminder of the enormity of her choice and the price she had paid. The Alpha King awaited her in a great hall at the heart of the fortress. The room was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, with tapestries depicting battles between light and darkness. At the center, the king stood, his cloak flowing around him, eyes like molten silver fixed on her. He did not move when she entered, yet every muscle in her body felt the weight of his gaze. "You have survived the trial," he said, his voice calm but layered with power. "Few mortals do, and even fewer bear the mark willingly. Tell me, child saver, what do you feel now?" Leora swallowed, the words caught in her throat. She had expected fear, but she had also felt something else. A strange connection, as if the mark pulsed with his presence, and every beat of her heart resonated with him. "I feel bound," she admitted, "but also protected. My son, he lives because of you." The king's expression softened, just for a moment, a fleeting shadow of something almost human. "The mark is more than protection," he said. "It is a bond. You and I, our lives are intertwined. Pain you feel, I feel. Strength you gain, I gain. And yet, your heart will remain your own, if you choose to claim it." Leora's chest tightened. The idea of being bound to such a powerful being was terrifying. Yet beneath the fear, there was a flicker of understanding, a recognition that perhaps she had found an ally, even if one cloaked in shadow. "I do not know what to think," she whispered. "I did not choose this, not truly. Choice is never simple." The king replied, stepping closer. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, yet there was a weight to him that was not physical. It pressed on her mind, on her heart. "But the mark chose you as much as you chose it, and soon you will discover why." Days passed, though in the fortress it was hard to tell. The moon outside never shifted, and time seemed to fold in on itself. Leora learned the rhythms of the palace. The silent meals, the endless corridors, the quiet hum of magic that pulsed through the stones. She was watched constantly, yet never threatened. The king appeared and vanished, testing her courage, her patience, and her understanding. He spoke little of himself, yet when he did, his words were weighted with centuries of solitude. He revealed fragments, that his power came at a cost, that bonds with mortals were dangerous, and that he had long carried the burden of his immortality alone. Leora listened, fascinated and wary, sensing both the depth of his loneliness and the sharp edge of his restraint. Their interactions were a dance of tension. She tested him with questions, observing the flickers of emotion behind his silver eyes. He tested her with tasks, asking her to confront shadows within the fortress, to navigate trials of courage that measured more than physical strength. They measured heart, resolve, and the willingness to trust. Each encounter left her breathless, her mind spinning, her heart caught between fear and something dangerously like admiration. One evening, the king led her to a balcony overlooking the forests beyond the fortress. The moonlight fell in ribbons across the trees, silver and unreal. Leora felt the wind lift her hair, and for the first time, she dared to speak without restraint. "Why mark me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why choose me? Of all people." He remained silent for a long moment, watching the shadows of the trees. Then, he turned, and for a fleeting second, Leora saw a vulnerability that made her chest ache. "Because courage such as yours is rare," he said softly. "Because you are willing to sacrifice everything for another. That makes you worthy. And because your heart may yet teach me something I have long forgotten. And added, and added, added. Also, and added, 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 added. Leora's fingers brushed the mark on her shoulder unconsciously. Its warmth spread through her arm, a constant reminder of the bond between them. Teach you? She asked. What could I teach a king like you? The meaning of trust, he said simply. Of connection, of love. Her breath caught. The word was dangerous, heavier than the walls of the fortress, heavier than the silvered moonlight that surrounded them. She looked down, unsure whether to meet his gaze. And yet, despite the tension, she felt a strange calm, a fragile thread of understanding weaving between them. But peace was not meant to last. One night, a shadow moved through the fortress halls, darker than the king's own cloak. Leora noticed at first a whisper of movement, a flicker at the edge of her vision. The king appeared at her side instantly, eyes narrowing. Someone comes, he said. A rival. One who covets the power the mark has chosen to give you. One who will not hesitate to take what they desire. Leora's heart leapt. Fear prickled her skin, yet she refused to show weakness. I am not afraid, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. Do not be foolish, the king warned. This one wields curses older than our time. You must understand. The mark binds you to me. Yes, but it also marks you as a target. You are part of this world now, whether you wish it or not. The rival appeared at the edge of the hall, a noble from a distant, cursed lineage, cloaked in shadows, and whispering words of power that made the air chill. Leora felt a tremor of instinctive fear. Yet the king stepped between them, a wall of darkness and authority. You will touch her no more, he said, voice rolling like thunder. She belongs to no one but the mark, and the mark belongs to me. The rival's eyes glittered, not with anger, but with amusement. We shall see, the voice hissed, and with a gesture, the shadows rippled, stretching toward Leora, hungry and cold. In that moment, Leora felt the mark pulse violently, burning with light and heat. It was as if it recognized danger, as if it understood her will to survive. She flinched, then steadied herself, raising her hands instinctively, not with skill, but with sheer will. And something unexpected happened. The shadows recoiled. The mark had awoken something latent within her, something that whispered of power she did not yet understand. The king's eyes widened, and for the first time, he looked less like an untouchable being of power, and more like one who had been surprised by the courage of another. You feel it, he said quietly, almost in awe. The mark responds to the heart that bears it. It listens. It obeys. Leora's chest heaved. Fear, awe, and a strange exhilaration mixed into a single torrent of emotion. She had faced death once at the moon trial, and now she faced it again. But this time, not as a helpless mother, but as someone beginning to understand the strange strength that had chosen her. The rival vanished into the shadows, leaving only a lingering chill and the threat of what might come next. The king's hand brushed against her shoulder, almost protective, almost intimate, and Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that the connection between them was no longer simply a mark. It was a bond, alive and restless, and filled with a tension that made every moment electric. You have learned quickly, the king said, voice low and quiet. And you are far stronger than I believed. But strength alone will not save you from what comes next. Only courage and trust can do that. Leora's heart pounded, a mix of fear and excitement. The fortress felt simultaneously safe and dangerous, filled with secrets and shadows that promised trials yet to come. She knew one thing with certainty. She would never be the same again. The mark had chosen her. The king had touched her life. And the shadows of the past and future had begun to stir around her. And somewhere in the depths of the fortress, a whisper of prophecy lingered, promising that the trials of heart, power, and destiny were only beginning. The moon hung low over the fortress, its silver light spilling across black stone walls and casting long, trembling shadows that danced with the wind. Leora stood on the highest balcony, her gaze fixed on the forests beyond. She could feel the mark on her shoulder thrumming, alive with power and anticipation. It was no longer just a symbol, it was a living bond, connecting her to the Alpha King, intertwining their fates in ways she had only begun to understand. The rival had not given up. Whispers of dark magic still lingered at the edges of the fortress, and every shadow seemed to move with a hidden intent. Leora knew that the danger was near, that the trials were far from over. Yet she no longer felt helpless. The mark pulsed not with fear, but with a strange, steady strength. She had discovered something within herself. A courage and power born of love, of sacrifice, and of the bond that tied her to the king. The Alpha King appeared at her side, his presence as commanding and immense as ever, yet softened by a rare vulnerability. "The time has come," he said, voice low and steady, carrying the weight of centuries. "They will not stop until they claim what is yours. You must stand, not only for yourself, but for the bond that holds us both." Leora met his silver gaze. There was no fear in it now, only an understanding, a shared recognition of what was at stake. "Then, I will stand," she said, lifting her chin, not as someone who offers herself, but as someone who fights for what she has earned. The rival emerged from the shadows, cloaked in dark magic that made the air chill and the moonlight waver. Their eyes glittered, hungry and cruel. "You think your mark can protect you?" The voice hissed. "Power such as that is fleeting. I will take what belongs to me." Leora felt the mark flare, warmth spreading through her arm and chest, as if it were responding to her defiance. For the first time, she did not shrink from the threat. Instead, she lifted her hands, letting the energy of the mark flow through her, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a shield. The shadows of the rival struck against it, curling and retreating as if repelled by a force beyond their understanding. The king stepped forward, his presence a towering wall of dark strength. "Leave her be," he said, and the air around him shimmered with his power. "She is mine, by the bond, by courage, and by choice. You will not touch her." The rival hissed and vanished into the shadows, their threat lingering like a bitter memory. Leora exhaled, feeling the tension in her body melt into a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had faced the shadow and emerged stronger, and in that strength, she sensed the truth. The mark was not a chain, but a bridge, a connection that allowed her courage to shine and her heart to grow. The king approached her, his hand hovering near her shoulder, not touching, but close enough to remind her of the bond between them. "You have awakened something rare," he said quietly. "The mark listens to the heart that bears it. It is not merely power, it is understanding, connection, and trust." Leora's gaze met his, and she felt a pull that was more than the mark, more than destiny. It was a pull of something deeper, something tender yet unyielding. "Then the bond is ours," she whispered. "Not because you forced it, but because we share it." A faint smile touched the king's lips, rare and fleeting. "Yes," he said, "but the bond demands more than acknowledgement. It demands choice, courage, and the willingness to face the unknown together." The fortress seemed to hold its breath as the moonlight shifted, casting silver ribbons across the walls. Leora felt the rhythm of the mark, steady and strong, and she realized she no longer feared the unknown. Instead, she welcomed it, knowing that she and the king would face it together. In the days that followed, Leora learned to harness the bond, to channel the mark's energy not as a weapon, but as a source of strength and insight. She walked the halls with the king, silent at first, then speaking, sharing thoughts and fears, and discovering glimpses of the man behind the immortal legend. He was not merely power and shadow, he was loneliness, longing, and a hidden capacity for care that only she could reach. Their connection deepened not in words alone, but in quiet moments. A hand brushing against hers, a shared glance that lingered too long. A mutual recognition of vulnerability and trust. Leora discovered that the king's cold exterior was a shield, one that could only be lowered for someone who had proven courage and loyalty beyond measure. She had done so not for power, not for fear, but for love of her child, and in doing so, had won a bond that neither of them could ignore. Yet, even amid this growing closeness, trials remained. The rivals' threat had not vanished entirely. Shadows still whispered, and the weight of prophecy hung over them like a storm cloud. Leora knew that the final challenge would not be against the rival alone, but against the fears and doubts within themselves. The fear of loss, the fear of trust, and the fear of the bond that now tied them inseparably. One night, the rival returned, more formidable than before, accompanied by a tempest of shadow and cold. Leora and the king stood together in the grand hall, facing the darkness. "We are bound," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "If we fall together. But if we stand stronger than either of us could alone." The king nodded, silver eyes gleaming. "Then, let us show them what courage, trust, and choice can do." The battle was not one of mere force, but of will. Shadows twisted and reached, trying to unbind the mark, to sever the bond. Yet Leora and the king moved in perfect rhythm, their hearts and minds linked, their courage amplifying the power of the mark. With each pulse, the rivals' strength faltered, their darkness retreating like a tide beaten back by relentless light. When the final shadow dissolved, the hall was silent except for the steady beat of their hearts and the faint hum of the mark. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The king knelt beside her, placing a hand over hers, not with dominance, but with a shared understanding. "You have changed me," he said quietly, "not through power, not through fear, but through courage, love, and trust. You have reminded me what it means to be bound, not by duty or immortality, but by choice and heart." Tears blurred Leora's vision. She had feared the mark, feared the bond, feared the king himself. Yet now, she realized that it had given her something she could not have imagined. Strength beyond her own, a connection beyond her own understanding, and a love that was not taken, but shared. The king's gaze softened, a rare tenderness, breaking through the centuries of isolation. "And you, Leora, have taught me that even the immortal can be redeemed, even the lonely can be loved, and even the shadowed heart can find light." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The bond between them, thrumming with life, power, and unspoken promise. It was a connection forged through trial, courage, and the willingness to face the unknown together, a bond that neither time nor shadow could sever. In the quiet that followed, Leora pressed her hand against the mark, feeling the rhythm of the king's pulse echo through her own. She knew that this was not the end, but a beginning. The rival's threat had been vanquished for now. Yet the world remained full of shadows, challenges, and unknowns. But she also knew that she would never face them alone. The king rose, offering his hand, and Leora took it. Together, they stepped toward the balcony, toward the silver moonlight that bathed the fortress and the forests beyond. There was fear, yet, uncertainty yet, but there was also courage, trust, and a bond that neither could deny. And high above, the moon watched silently, eternal and unyielding, as two hearts intertwined in shadow and silver light, prepared to face the future, bound, redeemed, and unbreakable.